Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Shodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad, Paramahansa, Padujikacharya, Ashtotar, the Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Mr. Pad, Paramahansa, Padujikacharya, Ashtotar, the Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavinda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 On this 20th day of May, 2020, in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 13, entitled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. Reading from text number 3. Chetragyam chapi mam vidhi. Chetragyam chapi mam vidhi. Sarva chetreshu bharata. Sarva chetreshu bharata. Chetra chetragyayo jnanam. Chetra chetragyayo jnanam. Yatta jnanam matang mama. Yatta jnanam matang mama. Chetragyam chapi mam vidhi. Chetragyam chapi mam vidhi. Sarva chetreshu bharata. Sarva chetreshu bharata. Chetra chetragyayo jnanam. Chetra chetragyayo jnanam. Yatta jnanam matang mama. Yatta jnanam matang mama. Chetragyam chapi mam vidhi. Chetragyam chapi mam vidhi. Sarva chetreshu bharata. Sarva chetreshu bharata. Chetra chetragyayo jnanam. Chetra chetragyayo jnanam. Yatta jnanam matang mama. Yatta jnanam matang mama. Word by word meanings. Chetragyam, the knower of the field. Cha, also. Api, certainly. Mam, me. Vidhi, no. Sarva, all. Chetreshu, in bodily fields. Bharata, O son of Bharat. Kshetra, the field of activities, the body. Kshetragyayoh, and the knower of the field. Jnanam, knowledge of, yat, that which, tat, that, jnanam, knowledge, matang, opinion, mama, my. Translation. O scion of Bharat, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Purport. While discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the supersoul, we shall find three different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are two souls, the individual soul and the supersoul. Because the supersoul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Krishna says, I am also the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body. I am the super-knower. I am present in every body as the Paramatma, or supersoul. One who studies the subject matter of the field of activity and the knower of the field very minutely in terms of this Bhagavad Gita can attain to knowledge. The Lord says, I am the knower of the field of activities in every individual body. The individual may be the knower of his own body, but he is not in knowledge of other bodies. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present as the Supersoul in all bodies, knows everything about all bodies. He knows all the different bodies of all the different species of life. A citizen may know everything about his patch of land, but the king knows not only his palace, but all the properties possessed by the individual citizens. Similarly, one may be the proprietor of the body individually, but the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizen is the secondary proprietor. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the supreme proprietor of all bodies. The body consists of these senses. The Supreme Lord is Rishikesh, which means the controller of the senses. We are on page 532. The second paragraph there. The third paragraph. The body consists of the senses on page 532. He is the original controller of the senses, just as the king is the original controller of all the activities of the state. The citizens are secondary controllers. The Lord says, I am also the knower. This means that he is the super-knower. The individual soul knows only his particular body. In the Vedic literature, it is stated as follows. Chaitanihi sharirani bijang chapi shubhashubhe Tani veti sayogatma tatak kshetra gyauchyate. This body is called the Kshetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body and the Supreme Lord, who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore, he is called the knower of all fields. The distinction between the field of activities, the knower of activities, and the supreme knower of activities is described as follows. Perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the supersoul is known in terms of Vedic literature as Gyan. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and the supersoul as one yet distinct is knowledge. One who does not understand the field of activity and the knower of activity is not in perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer of nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. One should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. This material world, which is the field of activities, is nature, and the enjoyer of nature is the living entity, and above them both is the supreme controller, the personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic language in the Shvetashvatra Upanishad 112, Bhokta bhogyam preritaram chamatva sarvam proktam trivadham brahmam etat. There are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, And the jiva, the individual soul, is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he is the factual controller. In this chapter, it will also be explained that out of the two knowers, one is fallible and the other is infallible. One is superior and the other is subordinate. One who understands the two knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly, I am also the knower of the field of activity. One who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not in knowledge. There are different kinds of bodies, and there are different owners of the bodies, because each individual soul has his individual capacity for lording it over material nature. There are different bodies. But the Supreme also is present in them as the controller. The word cha is significant, for it indicates the total number of bodies. That is the opinion of Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan. Krishna is the super soul present in each and every body apart from the individual soul. And Krishna explicitly says here that real knowledge is to know that the super soul is the controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoyer. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chukshu Unmidatamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the dark of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, this is near the beginning of this 13th chapter, in which Krishna will elaborate on the 6th subject matter. So the field of activity, the body, the knower or knowers of the body, the material energy, prakriti, the purusha, this is the supreme person, and knowledge and the goal of knowledge. So Krishna is systematically answering the question, beginning text 2, where he says simply that this body is the field of activity, and the knower of the field is called, or it's called Chaitra, and the Chaitra Ga is the knower of the field, the soul. But here he says in the 3rd verse, I am also the knower in every field. So that means that there's two knowers of the field. And the second knower is the super knower, so he knows all the bodies. Every single organism within the entire creation, he's within the heart there, and he's providing knowledge, remembrance, forgetfulness, and he's conscious of everything. He's also within every atom. So that is very significant. And then he immediately begins, and knowledge, yet one who knows this, the field and the knowers of the field, he has real knowledge. In another place, I think maybe later in this chapter, Prabhupada will say, real knowledge is knowledge of matter, spirit, and the controller of both. That's actual knowledge. And this is part of what we call sambandha gyan. There's a sambandha, abhideya, prayojana, progression. So sambandha gyan has to do with knowing what this world is as prakriti and the different divisions, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence. And also knowing the individual soul, knowing the source of them both, the Supreme Soul, Krishna, and all the relationships, how the creation takes place, how it's maintained, how it's destroyed, what our role is, and how we're entangled in this material energy, and how we can get out. That's all Sambandha Gyan, and that's going to be described in this chapter. And then the Abhideya is the practice, is the method by which we can extricate ourselves or be extricated from this entanglement of the material world. And that's called Abhideya, the practice of the hearing, chanting, remembering Krishna, all these different things. And the Prayojana is the goal, pure love for Krishna and return back to Godhead. And that's the result of the practice. So, but not this material subject matter that's being spoken of now is a kind of an expansion of things that have been mentioned before. Prakriti was certainly mentioned in the 7th chapter. And the super soul has been also mentioned. We've heard in the 10th chapter how Krishna is the supreme person. So, but he's going to expand on these subjects for our benefit. In one sense, the whole Bhagavad Gita can end on the 12th chapter. The 12th chapter we just finished is about Bhakti Yoga. And, if Arjuna understands that, then he'll just surrender and do what Krishna says and begin fighting. But this book is meant for all levels, and so he deals in more detail in the subject matters that we need to know to deepen our knowledge and deepen our faith. So, should we go on? Why not? Okay, that was text 3. Text 4. Now he will describe in more detail what the chaitra is. You ready? Tat chaitram yachayadrikcha yad vikari yataschayat sachayo yat prabhavascha tat samasena meshvanu. Now please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. Purport. The Lord is describing the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities in their constitutional positions. One has to know how this body is constituted, the materials of which this body is made, under whose control this body is working, how the changes are taking place, where from the changes are coming, what the causes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of the individual soul is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the supersoul, their different influences, their potentials, etc. One just has to understand this Bhagavad Gita directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every body to be one with the individual soul, the jiva. This is something like equating the potent and the impotent. So this is an introductory verse to this section that he's going to describe more detail of what the field is, what the body is made of. And Prabhupada is reiterating the need to understand this knowledge and to be not to confuse the individual soul with the Supreme Soul. So now Krishna, who's the Supreme Authority, he's going to invoke the previous authorities as an example. The Rishis say this, the Shastra says this, the Vedanta says this. Just to set the example, that our knowledge is not just coming out of thin air, it's not a result of our investigation, this is received knowledge from realized souls. Vishabhi bahoda gitam chando bir vividhai pratak Brahma Sutra Padaishchaiva Hetumon Vivinishtitai. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in the Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the supersoul by referring to a scripture, the Vedanta, which is accepted as authority. First he says, this is according to different sages. As far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage, and in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyasadeva's father, Parashara, is also a great sage, and he writes in his books of religiosity, Aham tvam cha tatanye. We, you, I, and the various other living entities are all transcendental, although in material bodies. Now we are fallen into the ways of the three modes of material nature, according to our different karma. As such, some are on higher levels, and some are in the lower nature. The higher and lower natures lower natures exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the Supersoul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature and is transcendental. Close quote. Similarly, in the original Vedas, a distinction between the soul, the supersoul, and the body is made, especially in the Katha Upanishad. There are many great sages who have explained this, and Parashara is considered principal among them. The word Chandobi refers to the various Vedic literatures. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is a branch of the Yajurveda, describes nature, the living entity, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated before, Kshetra is the field of activities, and there are two kinds of Kshetras, Kshetragya, the individual living entity and the supreme living entity. As stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.5, Brahmapucham Patishta. There is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamoy, dependence upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then in Pranamoy, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or life forms. In Ganamoy, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there is Brahman realization, called Vijnanamoy, in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next and supreme stage is Anandamoya, realization of the all blissful nature. Thus there are 5 stages of Brahman realization, which are called Brahmapucham. Out of these, the first 3, Annamoya, Pranamoya, and Jnanamoya, involve the fields of activities of the living entities. Transcendental to all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamoya. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying, Anandamayo Bhyasat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is by nature full of joy. To enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanamoy, Pranamoy, Jnanamoy, and Annamoya. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and different from him is the Anandamoya. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy in dovetailing himself with the Anandamoy, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as the supreme knower of the field, the living entity as a subordinate knower, and the nature of the field of activities. One has to search this truth in the Vedanta Sutra, or Brahma Sutra. It's mentioned here that the codes of the Brahma Sutra are very nicely arranged according to cause and effect. Some of the sutras, or aphorisms, are Naviyad Ashrutehi 232, Natma Ashrutehi 2318, and Paratu Tat Shrutehi 2340. The first aphorism indicates the field of activities, the second indicates the living entity, and the third indicates the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum among all the manifestations of various entities. So, quite a rich purport there. As I mentioned before we chanted this verse, Krishna is the supreme authority, and yet he invokes these different authorities, the Rishabhi, the Chandobi, which is the Vedic hymns, and the Brahma Sutra, or the Vedanta Sutra, before he begins describing in more detail the Kshetra and the Kshetragya. And also he will describe what real knowledge is. That was one of Arjun's questions. So, that Prabhupada talks about that this is a standard principle in order to root our concepts in the Vedas. That's why and the Vedic literature, this is why you hear Srila Prabhupada constantly quoting verses, mostly from Bhagavad Gita, but also from Bhagavatam and other sources, making the point and illustrating directly that he's not making anything up. It's all coming down from above. He's simply transmitting as it is the unchangeable, infallible knowledge that's originally coming straight from Krishna. So even though Krishna doesn't need to justify what he's saying, he's showing by example how one should root his concepts and his statements in the words of the rishis, in the Vedas, and in the Vedanta Sutra, possibly. Or Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra. So, that's all in the first paragraph. And then Prabhupada launches into this description of Anamoya, Gyanamoya, Vijnanamoya, and Anandamoya, and Pranamoya. The first is Annamoya, and Anna simply means food. And this is, you can see this in lower animals, where their goal in life practically is to eat. They spend half the day or more than half, looking for something to eat. And so it's a very rudimentary concept of it's different concepts of Brahman. In other words, one sees the Lord's the goal of their life in eating. That's Anamoya. Then there's this life symptoms where there's more to life than just eating. There was prana. Prana is life force. Realizing the supreme truth as food, one can realize the absolute truth in the living symptoms or life forms. So this is a step up. There's more to life than just eating. There are all of the activities of the senses and things, and one sees that as the ultimate reality in one's life. And then you get more now to human life, which is Anamoy, Pranamoy, and Gyanamoy, knowledge. And Prabhupada says here, Gyanamoy, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Now this always struck me as very something that I'd never thought of before, but which really tells you what goes on in the mind, ordinary mind. You're thinking something, and you're feeling it, and you're willing it. Now all those three of those are not always present. Sometimes you just think, but you don't really get to the point of action. Sometimes the thinking has to be there, the willing is there, but the feeling isn't there. You're doing it on the basis of, say, duty or whatever, but you don't want to do it. The feeling isn't there. But the feeling may arise simply by habit because of your exposure to the world. So sometimes there isn't much thinking. It's just a gut reaction. You're just doing something on the basis of feeling. And that sometimes can be very dangerous because the feeling can be very great anger or lust or something. And then what did I do? I did something that'll have a bad repercussion. So in Krishna consciousness, where the ultimate goal actually is a feeling, the feeling of prema, of love of God. And so but in order to get to that point, one has to, Hare Krishna, nice to see you. One has to think first. You have to be exposed to the knowledge. And from the knowledge, one gets to the point of acting. And there may not be any feeling right away, but the feeling is naturally there. The feeling of love of God is there. And so if one is able to get from hearing to get the knowledge and the thinking, and then on the basis of that act, chant Hare Krishna, do this, do that, the feeling will naturally arise. The feeling of prema will naturally come. So, but thinking, feeling, willing, this is a universal principle in the world. People, they get up with some ideas and then they act. But the problem is when the knowledge is not absolute, then the willing and the feelings are all based in relationship to this world. So that's why Prabhupada was so keen to have the knowledge presented in the form of his books, and he was keen to have them recorded. I don't know if you've ever known, there's so many nice recordings from 1966 you'll find, and but there's hardly anything from 67. He was in 67. He was in San Francisco for a few months, from mid-January to May, I think, not May, a little earlier than that, maybe beginning of May, and then he came back to New York. But from what I can tell, there were no recordings made in San Francisco. I don't recall hearing one, maybe one or two, which is a tragedy. It would be really nice to hear him sing. But those recordings, you can listen to them today because I listen every day, and they're just full of all this potency. There's Prabhupada speaking, and the message is always there. Sometimes you can hear as time goes on, he's a little weaker, health crisis, this and that, but he's always speak, because he knew that his speaking, there was no illusion, there was no material motivation. He was simply transmitting the pure knowledge that had been given to him, and it had its effect. It would enter the hearts and plant the seed, so that people wanted to chant, they wanted to practice devotional service. So, now that's Jnanamoy. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. There's Anamoy, Anamoya, Pranamoya, Jnanamoya, Vijnanamoya, and Anandamoya? Probably not. All right, we're on page 535, the third paragraph, beginning as stated before. Prabhupada, this is the only place he talks about this in the Bhagavad Gita. And this is different levels of Brahman understanding. And altogether it's called Brahma Pucham. I'm not sure what the Pucham means. But these are explained in Vedanta Sutra and some of the things Vedas he mentioned in text 5 in the text here. So it's interesting to see. It starts out with Anamoya is very rudimentary. It's like all of the organisms and things that are, their goal in life is to eat. Ana means food, very rudimentary. And then the Pranamoya is the life force, what does he call it? One can realize the absolute truth, and the living symptoms or life forms. So it's a little more, higher than just eating. There are other things going on, with your senses and so forth, and you're more involved. And then Jnanamoy, that's the part where we're discussing of thinking, feeling, willing. This is human life, that through the process of knowledge. And then Vijnanamoy is what? Then the Jnanamoy, in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. So this is clearly the beginning of transcendental realization, where you're come to the state of I myself am different from this Chaitra. We're reading about the Chaitra Gya. The Chaitra being the field of knowledge, of activity of the soul, the body, and the Chaitra Gya, which is the knower of the field, and that's the living entity. So that's beginning with Vijnanamoy, distinguishing the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. So this is step one. This is the A of the ABCs in the Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter. But beyond even Vijnanamoy, and Vijnan is, Prabhupada would always distinguish Gyan from Vigyan. Gyan is knowledge, sometimes like theoretical knowledge, book knowledge, the fact. But Vigyan is realized knowledge. Vijnana means that it's beyond just knowing the facts. You're actually getting experience. And finally, there's Anandamoya, realization of the all blissful nature, and that's bhakti. That's the ultimate realization of Brahman, the Supreme Brahman, Krishna. So that's an interesting way of thinking about it. It's another explanation in the Krishna book I can refer you to. And then we go on, mentioned in the Quotes of Brahma Sutra, very nicely explained. So he quotes some of these sutras, and each one is related to the living entity. The first one indicates the field. Okay, so this is all in relation to the Chaitra Gya, and the Supreme Chaitra Gya. Krishna has just distinguished, there's two Chaitra, this gate, knower of the field. I am also the knower in all field as a super soul. So he's pulling out, probably Baladev Vijayabhushan pulled out of the Vedanta Sutra these three, confirming what Krishna says in the Gita here. All right, let's go on. Text 6 to 7. Can you chant with that thing on? Okay. Mahabhutyanya hankaro buddhir avyaktamevacha indriyani dasaikangcha panchachendriya gocharaha ichcha dvesha sukham dukkam Sanghatas Chaitana Jitihi Etat Chaitram Samasena Sabika Namudaritam. So now he's going to give a little rundown of the Chaitra, the different parts of it, Chaitra being the body. The five great elements, five great earth, water, fire, air, ether, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses and the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions, all these are considered, in summary, to be the field of activities and its interactions. Purport. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the 5 great elements, the Mahabhutas. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Then the 5 working senses, voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then above the senses there is the mind, which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are the 5 objects of the senses, smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Now, the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms, represented by consciousness, and the convictions are the manifestation of the subtle body, the mind, the ego, and intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The 5 great elements are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception, or tamasa buddhi, intelligence and ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of material nature. The unmanifested modes of material nature are called pradhan. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail, along with their interactions, should study the philosophy in more detail. You can study it in the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Bhagavad Gita, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then it begins to decay, and at the last stage it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material thing. However, the Kshetrajna, the knower of the field, its proprietor, is different. So this is one of many descriptions of the field of activities, the material energy, which comprises our body, gross and subtle. You'll find this one in the Gita is obviously very concise. If you want to get into a real interesting description of this, the latter part of the teachings of Lord Kapila Dev in the 3rd canto. I forget the exact number of the chapter, but there's one called Understanding Material Nature, and there's another chapter or 2 that describe that, and how one leads to another. Everything begins with sound, and then comes ether and the ear, and then it goes down to fire and sight, and like that, all the way down to earth and fragrance, and they're one after another, they manifest. And it's all in relation to how the false ego is interacting with the different modes of nature. Without the false ego, we don't need any of this. We're just situated nicely in the spiritual world. That false ego, that false sense of self, arises when we rebel against Krishna. We want to have our own field of activity rather than simply be servants of Krishna, blissful servants. That seed, or that ability or tendency to turn away from Krishna and try to be independent, that's what it means to be marginal energy. You've heard this term, tatastha shakti. Tata is the border, is the margin, and what is it? And sta means situated. So situated on the border, tatastha, shakti, energy. That's us. And so when we try to leave Krishna, we turn away from Krishna, we become absorbed in his material energy. That's the source of fear, because we're artificially disconnected from Krishna, who's our protector and our savior and so forth. But we're given this whole field, and this is describing it in summary here, by which we can pretend to be controllers and enjoyers, and repeatedly fail, and have to die and give it all up and start a new one, and until we come in contact with this knowledge and we realize it's all been a big mistake. And we try to reform ourselves using the very body, the very field, which is our former prison house, in such a way, under the instruction of the acharyas, so that we can get free of the field. The famous taking a thorn and getting out the thorn idea. So all of this is necessary. And what are we going to do? We need knowledge, and that's what verses 8 through 12 are. It's describing the 20, I think, or 21 elements of knowledge. It's very illuminating. And then Prabhupada has a long purport which gets into each one of them. Now it's almost 8 o'clock, so why don't we launch into it? We won't complete it. We'll continue on Monday. I should be able to start giving class every night again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And we'll explore these in detail. It's very illuminating, this section of the Bhagavad Gita. So why don't we do it? No one's going to stop us. Amanitvam adambitvam. Are you ready there? Let's try it again. Amanitvam adambitvam. Ahimsa chantar arjavam. Acharyopasanam shaucham. Stayam atma vaningraha. Indriyarteshu vairagyam. Anahankara evacha. Janma mrityu jara vyadhi. Vyadhi. Dukkha doshan darshanam. Asaktirana bishvanga. Putra dara grahadishu. Nityam cha samachittatvam. Ishtanishtopapatishu. Mahichananya yogena. Bhaktirabhyabicharini. Etagyanamati proktam. Sorry. Agyanam yadatonyata. Agyanam. Agyanam is ignorance. Agyanam. Right? Agyanam yadatonyata. And then I say just eta gyanam iti proktam, which we kind of struggled through. Then the last quarter of the verse, kind of everyone. Oh, did I make a mistake? All right. Adhyatma gyana nityatvam. Tattva gyanartha darshanam. Eta gyanamati proktam. Agyanam yadatonyata. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever they may be, is ignorance. All right, so let's start this. Maybe we'll read 1 or 2 paragraphs. This process of knowledge is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent men as being the interaction of the field of activity. But actually, this is the real process of knowledge. If one accepts this process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. This is not the interaction of the 24 elements as described before. This is actually the means to get out of the entanglement of those elements. The embodied soul is entrapped by the body, which is a casing made of the 24 elements. And the process of knowledge, as described here, is the means to get out of it. Of all the descriptions of the process of knowledge, the most important point is described in the first line of the 11th verse. Mahichanan yayogena bhaktir avyabhicharini. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. So if one does not approach, or is not able to approach, the transcendental service of the Lord, then the other 19 items are of no particular value. But if one takes to devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develop within him. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.18.12, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavadgita sarvaya granais tattva samasate suraha. All the good qualities of knowledge, develop in one who has attained the stage of devotional service. The principle of accepting a spiritual master, as mentioned in the 8th verse, is essential. Even for one who takes to devotional service, it is most important. Transcendental life begins when one accepts a bona fide spiritual master. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, clearly states here that this process of knowledge is the actual path. Anything speculated beyond this is nonsense. Okay, let's read one more paragraph. As for the knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, who knows that he's not this body, anything, honor or dishonor, pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles, and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He could judge by these items. Okay, so we'll just explore for a little bit this first point, humility. Now, you've probably heard of the Shikshashtaka. So the first verse talks about the benefits of chanting, right? The 7 benefits that he's mentioning there. Of Cheto Darpana Marjanam, of polishing the mirror of the mind, of the heart. This is benefits of Harinam Sankirtan, which extinguishes the blazing fire of material existence, birth and death. You get liberation. It's beginning of all auspiciousness, both for yourself and especially when we do publicly for everyone else. It causes the white lotus of good fortune to open up. And it is the life and soul of transcendental knowledge. It gives, it expands the ocean of transcendental bliss. It gives one a taste of the nectar for which he's fully anxious at every step. And so everyone, and it bathes the soul in the nectar of transcendence, you know. So it's all good. The next verse he says, okay, Nam Namakadi Bahudani Sarva Shaktis. Then why don't we just take it up? Why doesn't everyone take it up? So Lord Chaitanya, taking the role of the conditioned soul, says, alas, you've invested your names with all your energies. There's no hard and fast rules for chanting them, but I'm so fallen, I have no taste for chanting. So the next verse, perhaps the most essential verse in all 8, is how we can get the taste for chanting and come to the point eventually of chanting all the time. So this is the important verse. We can all learn this verse. Trinadapi suni chena Tarorapi sahishnuna, amanina manadena, kirtaniyak sadaharihi. And it very much has to do with humility. So if he says, more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, to think all praise belongs to others, none belongs to me. Such qualities attract the Lord to bless one with the power to chant his name incessantly until the final hour. So this is the advantage. This is the great advantage of Kali Yuga, is that it's such a fallen age that if we get a little bit of enlightenment and see how truly helpless and fallen we are, then when we can really take that holy name as our lifeline and call out to Krishna with the deepest humility and desperation and helplessness. Whereas people living in previous ages, they live 1,000 years or more, and it's hard to get that sense of helplessness and humility, which is essential for success. So that's the great advantage of this Kali Yuga, especially because Lord Chaitanya has come in to propagate the holy name. So that's why this humility is first, amanatvam, it's always first. Because it also has to do with your approaching the guru, and surrendering. Because you get a little knowledge and you think you know everything. That's the disadvantage of this age, is, the internet. I can just Google it and I'll find out so much about ISKCON. Oh my God! I don't want to have anything to do with those people. There's so much garbage, the history, So that's, anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the importance of humility is cannot be overemphasized. It's the gateway to everything else. This is what Arjun, he thought he knew, he didn't want to fight. And he was quoting the Vedas. He was, But then he finally realized, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's not solving my problem. I'm still sitting here paralyzed, drop my bow, I'm confused. So then in a humble way, he said, I don't know what I'm saying. Now you just tell me, Krishna, now you're my guru. I surrender unto you as the shishya. Shishya means someone who's willing to be controlled. He sees, this is a worthy person. Now I'm going to surrender my will and my whatever they say. So then the whole thing changed, and in that mood, the Bhagavad Gita could flow to Arjun, and from Arjun to all of us. So this humility is important. It's difficult because that's even the pauper is proud of his penny. In this age, you may not have anything, but the last thing you have is humility. So coming to that stage is important, the first step. Okay, so there's no more time. And we want to explore these in greater detail when we reconvene on Monday. But we have time for one quick verse with a little poem attached. Radheti nama navasundara siddha mugdam. This is about chanting Hare Krishna. Radheti nama navasundara siddha mugdam krishneti nama madhurabhadagada dugdam savakshanam surabhiraga himena ramyam kritvata daiva bibame rasane chadarte. An excellent fresh nectar drink with endless subtle tastes, such is the name of Radha, by whom all three worlds are graced. Condensed milk that is wonderfully delicious, thick and sweet. Such is the name of Krishna, in whom all attractions meet. Now mix these drinks, O thirsty tongue, and add the cooling, fragrant spice of love, a prize the wise will try to buy at any price. And then at every moment, drink this beverage most fine, and make my heart supremely blissful, peaceful, and divine. So on that note, I changed it a little bit if you look in your, but you have to have it's fragrant cooling spice, not just cooling spice. That's in the verse. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.